I never meant to speak that gently again. Not after losing everything I once called a family. But when I saw those two children shaking in the snow, huddled against their mother's failing breath, the only words that came out were, "Come here, all of you." Silas Crowne didn't hesitate. The blizzard bit into his face, his coat already heavy with frost. Yet he stepped toward the widow's children as if answering a call older than grief itself. The boy tried to shield his sister. The little girl's hands were stiff, her lips trembling. Behind them, the woman's knees buckled, and Silas understood. If he was 1 minute later, this story would end on his porch. He lifted them toward the light of his ranch house, praying under his breath, unaware this night would change every winter of his life. The strange thing was, he heard someone whisper, "Help them," though he lived alone. Subscribe for the full tale, stay until the end, and tell me the city you're watching from. Snow hammered the broken barn like a fist, rattling every loose plank as Clara Harlan pressed her children deeper into the dark corner. Bo clung to his little sister, one arm braced against the wall, the other wrapped tight around the girl whose lips had gone the color of ash. Lila didn't speak. She only breathed shallow, frosting the air in front of her like a candle about to die. Clara bent low to meet her son's eyes. "Keep her awake," she whispered. "Pinch her if you have to." Bo nodded, though his own jaw trembled. "Mama, I can hear him again." So could she. The storm carried every sound, bouncing it off the timber and snow, but nothing masked the rhythmic thud of hooves circling the property. 3 riders, same as yesterday, same as the night before, same cold cruelty in their voices when they shouted through the wind that she owed their boss a debt she never made and a wedding vow she never promised. Clara drew the children tighter. Her fingers burned with cold, then went numb entirely. A line of scripture she hadn't spoken in years brushed through her mind. "Lord, keep them in your hands when mine can't hold on. And for a flicker, I can't lose them. Not both. Not again. Not tonight." Outside, one of the horses snorted hard. Another rider laughed. The barn door shuddered. Bo's whisper cracked. "Mama, it's the one with the black coat. I remember his voice." "Don't look that way," Clara whispered. "Hold your sister, you hear me? Don't move unless I tell you." Lila whimpered. Clara cupped the child's face, rubbing her thumb over the little girl's cheek, trying to stir warmth into skin that hardly felt alive. The wind slashed through the gaps in the boards, stinging Clara's eyes, and she blinked fast because she could not afford to cry. Not when the children watched her like she was the last tree in a burning field. The door creaked again. Boots scraped the stoop. Clara grabbed a broken length of plank, raising it like a club. She planted her feet between the riders and her children, one arm spread behind her to keep Bo from rushing forward. He'd do it. He'd die trying to buy her a heartbeat. She knew it. She hated that she knew it. Snow burst inward as the barn door slammed open against the wind. Light spilled in, a lantern glow, unsteady and pale, and a tall figure stepped inside. The storm roared behind him, dragging loose snow across the floor like a tide. Clara braced. "Stay back," she hissed. "I'll fight." Her voice cracked on the last word, but her stance didn't. The man didn't move, didn't reach for his gun, didn't bark an order. He just tipped the lantern a little higher, letting its glow fall over her shaking hands. The plank, the trembling children huddled behind her, His coat was thick with frost, shoulders squared against the cold, hat pulled low to keep the snow out of his eyes. He smelled of horse, iron, and winter pine, clean, but cut through with the raw bite of the storm. Behind him the riders called again, voices muffled by wind. "Search the barn! She's in there! Kids, too!" Clara's breath snagged. She raised the plank higher. The stranger's eyes moved to Bo and Lila, slowly, carefully, as though he were counting their breaths, as though each one mattered to him already. Something in his jaw tightened. Snow stung Clara's cheeks. "Dear God, spare my children. Take anything else." For a moment she couldn't feel her legs. The man stepped to the side, not toward her, but toward the shadowed bales of hay stacked near the east wall. He angled his lantern so she saw the empty space behind them, dry, hidden from the door, shielded from outside eyes. He spoke low, calm. "Come here," he said, "all of you." Clara froze. The storm hissed. Somewhere outside, a rider cursed. She didn't move. The man didn't advance, he simply waited, as though her decision mattered, as though he knew what it cost a mother to gamble her children's lives on the mercy of a stranger. Bo's breath rattled behind her. "Mama, Lila's falling asleep." Clara tightened her grip on the plank. Her heart pounded so loud, she could barely hear the storm. "I ain't your enemy," the man said softly. "But they are. You let 'em find you out in the open. They'll take more than your debt." His voice held no threat, only certainty, like he'd seen this kind of cruelty too many times to doubt it now. Wind howled against the doorframe. A hinge snapped. Footsteps thudded outside, closer. Clara looked at her children, at the broken boards, at the man whose lantern shook just enough to show he was breathing hard, too. "I just want them safe," she thought. "Lord, guide my feet where my eyes can't see." She lowered the plank, just an inch. Then she gathered both children and pressed them against her skirts, stepping toward the stranger and the small pocket of safety behind the hay. He shifted aside to make room, shielding the lantern with his palm. Outside, a rider reached for the barn door. Inside, Clara's world narrowed to the warmth of her children's bodies and the stranger's steady voice as he whispered, almost like a prayer in the cold. "Stay low. Don't speak. I'll handle what comes." The door rattled again, and Clara realized something new. Peace might never be real tonight, but danger had just chosen a different man to face first. Wind shoved against the barn like it wanted in, hurling needles of snow through every crack. The stranger moved first, swift, silent, lifting the lantern just enough to guide Clara, Bo, and Lila toward the stacked hay. He didn't touch them, didn't crowd them, only carved a path with his broad frame, blocking the draft as much as any wall could. "Down behind there," he murmured. "Keep your heads low." Clara crouched, clutching the children close. Bo wrapped both arms around Lila, rubbing her arms fast, trying to stir warmth into a body that refused to hold it. Clara felt her daughter's breath brush her coat, light, uneven. "Lord, don't let her slip away. Not like this." The stranger set the lantern between two bales, dimming the flame with a twist of the knob until the barn swallowed most of the light. Then he stepped away from them, out into the open stretch of dirt between the hay and the front door. He didn't look back. Bo whispered, "Mama, what's he doing?" Clara didn't know, but she watched him kneel briefly, pressing gloved fingers to the dirt as though reading tracks even in the half-dark. Snow blew in behind him, dusting the floor white. He scanned the patterns near the doorway, the scuffs, the boot drag from whoever had burst in earlier. Then he stood, straightened, and positioned himself squarely in front of the family he did not know. The barn door rattled again. "Crowne!" a voice barked through the storm. "Don't play hero. Move aside." Clara's stomach dropped. Crowne? She'd heard that name whispered in town weeks ago, spoken with equal parts respect and fear. Silas Crowne, rancher, millionaire by mining luck and land inheritance, a man who didn't answer to anyone except, some said, the Lord himself when he came knocking. The stranger, Silas, didn't look toward the door. "This is private property," he called, voice low but carrying. "Turn your horses around." A rough laugh followed. "We're looking for a woman owing a debt. Ain't no law against finding what's owed." Silas shifted his stance. "And I'm telling you she ain't here." Clara held her breath. Lila's small fingers curled into her coat. Bo leaned forward like he wanted to stand, but Clara pressed a steadying hand to his chest. Snow blew inward as the door swung wider. One of the riders stepped inside, brushing off his coat, boots crunching on frozen straw. He kept one hand on his holster, the other pulling a kerchief down from his face. His eyes swept the barn, cold, practiced, hungry. Silas didn't move. "You boys lost," the intruder smirked. "Your boss, Mr. Ketchum, says she ran this way." Silas almost smiled, almost. "Funny, I don't answer to Ketchum." The man took a step forward. "Move aside. We're searching." Silas stepped in just enough to block the view behind him. "On whose authority?" A beat. Then the man's jaw clenched. "On ours," Silas's voice dropped. Quiet, sure. "Then you're trespassing." Clara saw the twitch of the rider's fingers near his gun. She clutched Bo's sleeve. A single gunshot in this cold would echo straight through her children's bones. The rider hesitated, barely, but it was enough. Outside, one of his partners shouted, "Forget it! We'll try the ridge!" The man inside clicked his tongue, spat to the side, then backed toward the open door. "This ain't over, Crowne. Sloan don't like being lied to." Silas's reply came steady as scripture. "Then he ought to quit asking questions he ain't ready for answers to." The rider muttered a curse, swung onto his horse, and the three shadows vanished into the storm, hooves fading into the wind. Silas waited, counted the silence. Only when the snow swallowed all sound did he turn back to the haystack. Clara tensed as he approached. Not fear anymore, but something sharper, something she couldn't name while her heart still shook. He knelt beside them, lantern light softening the hard lines of his face. "You're safe for now," he said quietly. "But they'll return. Men like that always do, until their boss gets what he wants." Clara swallowed. "And what about you, Mr. Crowne? What do you want?" For a moment he didn't answer. His gaze lingered on Bo's small hands rubbing life back into Lila's fingers, on Clara shielding both children with a body that had no strength left to spare. Then Silas said the first honest sentence of the night. "I want them alive by morning." Something in Clara's chest cracked, not from weakness, but from the terrible relief of finally hearing someone say what she'd been begging heaven for since sunset. He stood, lifting the lantern. "Storm's getting meaner by the minute. If we stay here, all four of you freeze before dawn." He paused, voice dropping to a near whisper. You come with me now, ma'am. I'll take you somewhere warm. Clara looked at her children, at the splintered boards, at the empty dark outside the door. Please, Lord, show me the step to take. She rose slowly, Bo and Lila tucked tight against her. Silas nodded once. Not a command, an acknowledgement. Stay close. I'll keep you covered. Wind howled, snow swirled inward, and as Clara followed him out of the barn, she felt the faintest spark of something she thought she'd lost long ago. Hope, maybe, or the fear of it. Either way, the storm did not feel quite as loud as it had before. Snow slammed sideways as Silas shouldered through the barn door, holding it open just wide enough for Clara and the children to slip through. The wind hit them like a punishment. Lila whimpered, face buried in Clara's coat. Bo hunched around her, taking the brunt of the cold without complaint. Silas didn't waste a breath. He loosened the tie on his coat, swung it around Lila, and pulled the collar high to shield her face. Hold her tight, he said, voice firm but not harsh. She ain't got much heat left. Clara swallowed hard. You'll freeze. I've been colder, he answered, and though his breath shook in the air, he kept moving. The lantern bobbed in his hand as he led them through the whiteout, snow lifting in sheets, wind carving invisible walls. Clara stumbled more than once. Each time Silas slowed without turning, as if he could sense her steps the way a rancher knew the ground beneath his horse. The storm swallowed everything, sky, hills, sounds. Only the faint outline of fences told Clara they were still on his land. A gust nearly knocked her sideways. Lord, keep my legs beneath me. Keep my children breathing. For a blink, she imagined her knees giving out, Lila slipping from her arms, Bo screaming her name. But Silas's hand shot back, finding her elbow, steadying her with a grip strong enough to feel like a promise. The ranch house emerged from the white like something half-remembered. Tall, dark wood, windows glowing amber, smoke curling from a chimney that stood stubborn against the storm. Clara's breath caught. Not from beauty, but relief so sharp it bordered on pain. Silas kicked snow off his boots, lifted the latch, and opened the door. Warmth rushed out. Real warmth. Inside, a fire roared in a stone hearth, throwing orange light across polished floors. The smell of coffee and stew clung to the air. Clara blinked, visions swimming. She had forgotten a place could feel like this. Set 'em by the fire, Silas said to no one, until a middle-aged man hurried from the kitchen, coat half-buttoned. The man nodded fast, scooting a thick rug closer to the blaze. Silas turned to Clara. Sit. Get your hands near the heat, but don't touch anything hot yet. Frostbite bites back. His tone carried the blunt certainty of someone who'd learned it the cruel way. Clara knelt on the rug. Heat wrapped around her like a memory she wasn't ready for. Bo lowered Lila to her lap, rubbing her little sister's legs through the coat. Lila's eyes fluttered, breathing still shallow. A crack of fear tore through Clara. She's too cold. Silas crouched beside them. She's still breathing. That's the part we work with. He nodded to the house hand. Blankets and Amos. Tell him to run. The man sprinted off. Clara looked up at Silas. His hat dripped meltwater onto the floor, shoulders shaking with the violence of the storm he'd walked through. Frost clung to his beard. His cheeks burned raw. The lantern on the table flickered as if uncertain whether it should stay lit. Why are you doing this? she whispered. His eyes moved to Bo, then to Lila, then back to her. He didn't answer right away, not because he hesitated, but because he weighed his words like everyone cost him something. I saw 2 children about to die, he said finally. That's reason enough. Then quieter, almost to himself. Should have saved more. Long time ago. Clara felt something in her ribs tighten then loosen, like a knot pulled free by a single thread. She didn't know this man, but the way he stood, between her children and danger, between her fear and collapse, felt achingly familiar, like someone she once prayed for, once begged the Lord to send. The door burst open again as Dr. Amos Pike stomped snow from his boots. Where's the little one? He barked. Silas pointed. She's cold, Amos. Too cold. The doctor knelt, hands moving fast, checking fingers, cheeks, toes, breath. She's still with us, he said, but she's right on the edge. Keep her awake if you can. Clara bent close. Lila, look at Mama. Sweetheart, open your eyes. Lila stirred, tiny voice barely a thread. Mama, I'm tired. Clara's heart cracked. I know, baby, but stay with me, please. Silas rose. You 2 need dry clothes. Bo, come here, son. Bo didn't move at first, wary, protective, but something in Silas's stance, in the way he didn't crowd them, finally earned the boy's trust. Bo stepped forward. Silas unbuttoned a wool coat from a nearby peg and draped it over the boy's shoulders. You did good out there, he said. Real good. Bo swallowed, voice small. I tried to keep her warm, sir. You did. Silas rested a steady hand on the boy's back. Lord sees that. Clara felt heat sting her eyes, not from fire, but gratitude sharp enough to hurt. Silas turned to the window, watching snow hammer the glass. His jaw tightened. They'll come again, he said quietly. Men who hunt women in storms don't stop at one night. He looked back at Clara. Her breath caught. Not fear, recognition. This man had seen storms far worse than snow. For a moment, the fire popped loud enough to startle Lila awake. She whimpered. Clara soothed her gently, whispering prayers she hadn't spoken in years. Silas didn't pray out loud, but the way he stood guard by that window, it felt close. Outside, wind screamed across the plains. Inside, the room held its fragile warmth. But peace, Clara knew, never came without a price. And somewhere out in the white, someone else was still counting the hours until sunrise. The fire had settled into a deep orange glow by the time Clara's hands stopped shaking enough for her to unlace Bo's boots. Melted snow pooled at their feet. The warmth should have comforted her. It didn't. It only reminded her how close they'd come to never feeling heat again. Silas Crowne set a kettle on the stove, his movements steady, deliberate. Clara noticed that he favored his left shoulder when he reached upward, as though an old wound stirred whenever the cold got in his bones. Mama, Bo whispered. Lila's breathing better. Clara brushed damp curls from her daughter's forehead. Thank the Lord, she murmured. Her voice cracked on the last word. Silas came back with 3 mugs, steam curling from the rims. Drink slow, he said, offering one to Clara. Empty stomach hits hard. She wrapped her fingers around the tin, grateful for the burn. You didn't have to bring us here. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled a folded sheet of paper from his coat. Creased, dirt-stained, familiar in a way that made Clara's stomach twist. He laid it gently on the table between them. Her heart turned to stone. The debt notice. The same one Vernon Ketchum's men had waved in her face for weeks. Numbers invented out of thin air. A signature forged so crudely, she'd felt sick staring at it. Clara reached for it, then drew her hand back. Touching it felt like admitting defeat. Silas studied her expression the way a man studies weather signs before a long ride. "Tell me," he said quietly. "Where'd this come from?" Clara swallowed hard. "From a lie." Her fingers curled. "My husband didn't owe anyone. He died owning that land free and clear." "And Ketchum says otherwise," Silas murmured. She nodded. He leaned a hip against the table. "And he wants you to marry him to settle it." Clara's breath hitched. She hated saying the next words out loud. "He said, a woman with no money needs protection. He'd make sure the children were looked after." Silas's jaw tightened at the phrasing. "Looked after by who?" He didn't say. But Clara remembered the way Ketchum had smiled when he said it. Too soft, too patient, like a man choosing cattle rather than people. Silas rested both hands on the table, shoulders tense. You burn this notice and he sends 10 more. You refuse him and he takes it personal. Men like him don't understand no. They hear it as a challenge. Clara closed her eyes. "I know." Silas exhaled slowly. "I can't fix the whole world, but I can fix this piece of it." He tapped the notice. "Marshall Hale's been waiting for a reason to look into Ketchum's mine accounts. This'll do." Clara looked up sharply. "I don't want trouble following you because of us." "You didn't bring trouble," Silas said. "Trouble came hunting. I'm just standing in its way." A quiet fell between them. Not heavy, not easy. Just true. Beau watched the two adults with wide, wary eyes. The boy knew more than he should. Clara saw it every time he listened instead of spoke. Children raised by hardship learned silence before speech. Silas turned to Clara again, his voice softer. "Stay here. For tonight and the next. I'll put men on the ridges. Hale will be notified by dawn." Clara's throat tightened. "And what would you ask for in return, Mr. Crowne?" She didn't mean the words to sound sharp. They simply came from a place too bruised to hide. Silas blinked, surprised. Then he shook his head. "Ma'am, I'm not asking anything." He hesitated, then added, "I've seen what happens when a woman runs out of places to run. It don't sit right with me." The fire popped. Sparks lifted, briefly golden before fading. Clara stared into the flames, remembering the last time a man had stood between her and danger. Her husband had died for it. She wondered if the Lord truly sent replacements, or if this was just another test of whether she still believed in mercy. Beau touched her sleeve. "Mama, are we staying?" Clara looked at her children, skin pinking back to life, breath steadier, and felt, for the first time in weeks, something that wasn't terror. Not safety, but something in its direction. "We're staying," she whispered. Silas nodded once as though he never doubted it. He handed her a small brass key. "Bedroom door locks from the inside. Use it." Clara held the key tight. "Mr. Crowne, you won't leave us alone tonight, will you?" He met her eyes. For the briefest moment, a flash of old grief rimmed the edge of his expression. "No, ma'am. he said. I won't. There wasn't a promise spoken after that, but it hung in the heat between them anyway, fragile and necessary as breath. Outside, the storm clawed at the windows. Inside, the house held its warmth and its warning. Because peace, Clara knew, was just the quiet a predator used before turning back around. Morning light crept slow across the ranch, pale and brittle after a night of storm cracks and rattling shutters. Clara woke to the faint smell of coffee drifting under her door, the kind that lingered deep and bitter and comforting at the same time. Bo slept curled around Lila, both children wrapped tight in quilts thicker than anything they'd ever owned. For a moment, Clara let herself believe the house was safe. For a moment only. A soft knock came. Ma'am, breakfast's on the stove. Eat before it cools. Silas's voice. Low, controlled. Too careful for a man on his own land. Clara rose, easing herself from the bed. Cold boards kissed her feet. She watched her children breathe, slow, steady, and whispered a quiet thank you into the dim light. Christmas or not, the Lord still answered in ways she didn't always understand. When she stepped into the hallway, Silas was already heading downstairs, coat on, hat in hand. He didn't look like a man preparing for a meal. He looked like someone bracing for what waited beyond the door. You're leaving? Clara asked. He paused halfway down. Checking the ridge lines. Tracks freeze overnight. Best time to read 'em. She followed him to the landing. Will Ketchum's men return? Silas tugged his gloves tight. They didn't get what they came for. That makes them stubborn. Clara swallowed. Is stubborn the same as dangerous? Silas's gaze flicked toward her. Only a heartbeat, but enough to answer the question without words. Dangerous didn't begin to cover it. He tipped his hat. Eat while I'm out. Kids need strength. So do you. Then he left through the side door, boots thudding across the porch. Clara listened until the sound faded into the brittle morning. She found Dr. Amos Pike in the kitchen, stirring eggs with slow, practiced motions. He gone already? The doctor asked without looking up. Yes. Man don't sleep more'n 2 hours these days. Pike sighed. Not since, well, not my story to tell. Clara frowned. Not since what? Pike hesitated. His whisk paused mid-air. Not since he lost his family. The words settled heavy between them. Clara's breath caught. His family? Pike nodded once. Wife and little girl. Winter took 'em. Different storm, but the cold don't care what year it is. Clara felt something inside her ache in recognition. Loss knew loss. And suddenly, Silas's quiet, controlled presence made a different kind of sense, like a man walking through the world carrying a memory he refused to set down. After breakfast, Clara stepped into the hallway and saw a door slightly ajar at the far end. She hadn't noticed it before. Something gentle tugged at her chest. Against her better judgment, she walked toward it. The room inside was small, dusty, untouched. A child's boots sat neatly in the corner, soles unworn. A folded quilt rested across a narrow bed, stitched with tiny blue flowers. On the dresser lay a wooden horse, carved by hand, its paint chipped with time. Clara touched the horse's mane. Her fingers trembled. Lord, he kept it all this time. A faint sound made her turn. Silas stood in the doorway. He didn't step inside, didn't make an excuse, didn't hide the way his jaw tightened as he looked at the little boots. Clara swallowed. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't—" "You're fine," he said quietly. But his voice carried something rougher, something that scraped the edges of his restraint. He stepped forward at last, picking up a silver pocket watch from the dresser. He opened it with a thumb. Inside, a tiny engraving glimmered. Anna Crowne, 1883. He closed the watch with a soft click. "I was late," he murmured. "Storm hit sooner than they said. By the time I made it back—" His breath shuddered once. "I don't let storms surprise me anymore." Clara's heart pressed painfully against her ribs. He stood so still she feared he might break beneath his own silence. "I didn't mean to pry," she whispered. He shook his head. "You weren't prying. Grief's a room with an open door. Folks walk in sometimes, even if you don't invite 'em." Clara lowered her gaze. "I know what it's like to lose what you can't replace." He studied her for a moment, really studied her, as though weighing whether he had the right to believe her words. "Pike says you're strong," he said at last. "Stronger than you think." Clara let out a shaky breath. "Strength isn't the same as being safe." "No," Silas agreed quietly. "But safe is something I can work on." He stepped aside, giving her space to leave the room. As Clara passed him, Lila's soft cry echoed from down the hall. Clara turned. Silas nodded toward the sound. "Go on. She needs her mama." Clara hesitated just long enough to meet his eyes. "Everyone needs someone," she said. He looked away first, but not before the truth flickered across his face. Yes, he did too. And the house, warm as it was, didn't erase the cold gathering on the horizon. Men like Ketchum didn't quit. Storms didn't forget. And peace, Clara knew, never came without a price. Morning settled softly over Crown Ranch, the kind of gentle light that made frost look like scattered diamonds across the pasture. Clara watched from the porch as Beau led a chestnut mare along the fence line, copying the exact movements Silas had shown him the previous afternoon. The boy kept glancing toward the ridge, checking the tree line for shadows that weren't supposed to move. "Eyes forward, son," Silas called from the barn. "Horse feels what you fear." Beau straightened, squared his shoulders like a man with something to prove. Clara wasn't sure whether to feel proud or heartbroken. Inside the house, Lila sat on a stool while Iris Hale braided her hair into two neat plaits. The little girl's giggle, quiet, tentative, bounced off the kitchen walls, startling everyone each time it appeared. Clara caught one of those small laughs and held it inside her chest. It had been too long since laughter lived under their roof. By midday, the ranch breathed like a home. Not safe. Clara didn't trust safety anymore. But warmer. Lived in. Honest. Silas returned from the north pasture, coat dusted with snow, scarf iced stiff at the edges. He stamped his boots near the doorway. "Tracks are fresh," he told Pike, who was cleaning his bag of instruments. 3 riders. They kept their distance. Clara's stomach tightened. "Ketchum's men?" "Likely." Silas met her gaze. "They're circling. They ain't attacking. Not yet." Not yet. Words that landed like stones in her belly. Silas set his coat aside, and motioned Clara toward the yard. You said you wanted to learn. Now's as good a time as any. He placed a small revolver in her hands. It didn't feel like a weapon, more like a responsibility she'd never wanted but couldn't refuse. Stand with your feet here, he said, nudging her boots into position. Shoulders relaxed, breath steady. Clara lifted the gun, arms trembling. I've never... You will, he said, and you'll do fine. He moved behind her, not touching, just close enough for her to sense the steadiness in him. His voice dropped low. Your children need you armed as much as they need you praying. Clara took a breath sharp with cold. She squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked against the hills, echoing back like a warning. Lila flinched from the porch. Bo froze mid-step. It pulls left, Silas said calmly. That's nerves. Again. She fired again, and again, each shot steadier than the last. When the lesson ended, Clara expected him to take the revolver back. Instead, he pressed it gently into her palm. You keep it, he said. Her breath caught. This is your gun. Doesn't matter, he replied. You'll sleep better with it in your room. Clara didn't tell him she hadn't slept well in months. She didn't have to. The way his eyes softened, just slightly, told her he already knew. Afternoon waned into dusk, the children, huddled by the fire with mugs of warm milk, while Clara worked through the ranch ledger Silas had set on the table. Figure I'd give you real work instead of charity, he'd said earlier. Money runs straighter when more than one pair of hands keeps it honest. Clara appreciated the gesture more than she'd expected. She was halfway through the columns when she heard two ranch hands whispering in the hall. Woman blows in during a storm and goes straight to the big house. Crowne's finally taken a wife, looks like. Or she's taken him. Never seen a man fall that quiet before. Their laughter scraped something raw inside her. Clara shut the ledger. Her voice didn't shake when she spoke. Mr. Crowne, we should leave. Silas froze beside the fire. He didn't turn right away. Leave where? Anywhere, she said. I won't have my children grow up under whispers. I won't trade one form of danger for another. Silas exhaled slowly. People talk, ma'am. They always will. You can't outrun every tongue in Montana territory. I can outrun shame, Clara said. He stepped closer, not looming, just present. Shame belongs to the ones speaking lies, not you. Clara lifted her chin. Nevertheless, I'll work off our stay. I won't be beholden to you. You're not, he said, voice low. You never were. For a long moment they stood in the glow of the fire, two people cornered by the same world, but refusing to bow to it. From the hearth, a log cracked sharply. The children jumped. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying something sharper than cold across the yard. Iris Hale slipped through the doorway then, snow powdered across her shawl. She handed Silas a folded paper with a grim look. They're talking in town, she said, and not kindly. Silas opened the note without changing expression. Clara tried to read his eyes, failed. He handed the paper to her. Widow moves into millionaire's home. Debt gone. Wedding soon. Her breath stuttered. This isn't true. No, Silas said quietly. But truth don't travel as fast as gossip. Bo tugged Clara's sleeve. Mama, does this mean people think we belong here now? Clara knelt, brushing hair from his forehead. It means people think what they want, sweetheart. But God knows the truth. Silas watched her with an unreadable heaviness. They'll come again, he said. Ketchum's men. Maybe others. Clara nodded. I know. Silas glanced toward the windows where the shadows lengthened. We keep moving forward, he said. One day at a time. But Clara heard what he did not say, what neither of them dared to speak aloud yet. Peace doesn't last out here. Not when men like Ketchum walk the earth. Not when storms carry more than snow. And not when whispers can wound deeper than bullets. Snow rolled in again by mid-afternoon, thin flakes drifting sideways across the valley, like ghosts that had forgotten where to rest. Clara noticed it first, how the horses in the lower corral grew restless, ears flicking toward the ridge. Animals always sensed danger before people admitted it. Silas stepped out onto the porch, coat already on, hand resting near the revolver holstered at his side. Not gripping it, just remembering it was there. Stay inside, he murmured to Clara. All of you. Bo pulled Lila close, guiding her toward the parlor. Clara watched Silas walk a few paces out into the yard, shoulders squared, breathing slow. A man reading the land the way a preacher reads scripture. Then the riders appeared. 3 of them, descending the ridge in a tight line, horses kicking up sheets of powder. They weren't pretending this time. No cautious distance. No circling like coyotes. They came straight. Clara's pulse thudded. Lord, not today. The men reined in near the porch, snow spraying their coats. One lifted a folded paper, waving it like a badge. We're here for a woman skipping debt, he called. Legal search. Silas didn't move. This land's private. The man smirked. And this here's a territorial document. He tossed it forward. The wind slapped it against Silas's boot. We're looking through the house. Clara stiffened. Bo, standing just inside the doorway, whispered, Mama, he's lying. His hand found hers, small and tight. Silas bent, picked up the paper, and scanned it with a dry laugh. Forged, poorly. He folded it once, clean and deliberate. No one goes inside. The leader nudged his horse forward until its breath steamed inches from Silas's face. You think your money makes you untouchable? No, Silas said calmly. But the law does. The man's grin sharpened. Ketchum doubled the reward. Someone'll talk. Someone'll point us the right direction. Clara felt the blood drain from her hands. Lila whimpered, burying her face in her coat. Silas's jaw tightened. Listen well. There are children in that house. My land. My rules. You ride out now, and maybe we pretend this frost on your brain is temporary. The rider's smile died. We'll be back with more men. Silas stepped closer, voice lowering. Bring an army if you want, but keep this in mind. He tapped the man's stirrup with one gloved finger. The ground here don't hide footprints as well as you think. The threat hung in the cold like a blade. The riders wheeled their horses and thundered back toward the ridge. Silas didn't move until they were nothing but dusted shadows. Inside the house, silence pressed hard. Clara gathered the children, but she could feel the tension humming through the air, like a violin string pulled too tight. Bo stood rigid at the window, fists clenched. They'll hurt her, Mama, he whispered. They'll take her. His voice cracked. I won't let them. Clara knelt. Bo. But the boy was already moving. He slipped into Silas's study, climbing onto a chair. Clara followed too late, just in time to see him reach for a small revolver lying near a stack of maps. No, she gasped. Bo gripped the gun with both hands, face white with resolve far too old for 9 years. I'll shoot if they come back, he said. I can do it. I swear I can. Lord, not this. Clara felt something inside her collapse. Silas appeared in the doorway. He didn't shout, didn't rush. He simply stepped forward, his presence filling the room like a tide rising slow but unstoppable. Son, he said softly, put that down. Bo's chin trembled. They'll take Mama. They'll take Lila. I won't let 'em. Silas crouched, eye level with the boy. Killing a man is a weight you don't crawl out from under. Not at your age. Not ever. Bo shook his head, tears sliding hot. I'm not scared. Silas reached out, slow, steady, and wrapped his hand around the revolver, easing it free. It's not about fear. It's about the truth. You shoot somebody today, you'll still hear it 50 years from now. A single tear hit the wooden floor. Bo's shoulders sagged. Silas stood, set the gun far out of reach, and placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. Protecting your family don't always mean pulling a trigger. His voice softened. Sometimes it means trusting someone else to hold the line. Bo looked up at him, eyes red. Will you? Silas hesitated, just long enough for Clara to see the wound behind his certainty. Then, I will, as long as I draw breath. Clara's throat tightened, not at the words, but at how he said them, quiet, steady, the way a promise sounded when it hurt to speak aloud. Snow battered the windows. Somewhere out in the valley, men were spreading news of a doubled reward. Men were planning another ride. Men were deciding what it would take to break a woman who refused to bow. Inside the ranch house, Silas checked the locks one by one, and Clara understood the truth she'd been avoiding. Their peace was over. The next morning broke thin and gray, the kind of dawn that never fully committed to daylight. Clara stood by the stove, warming Lila's hands against a mug of milk, while Bo traced circles on the frosted windowpane, watching for shadows that didn't belong. Silas Crowne walked in with snow on his shoulders and a folder tucked beneath his arm. He set it on the table, leather creaking softly. What's that? Clara asked. Paperwork, Silas said. Real paperwork, not the trash Ketchum sends. Dr. Pike glanced up from his kettle. You stirring a hornet's nest, Crowne? Good, Silas replied. Let it sting the right people for once. He opened the folder, spreading maps, ledgers, and sworn affidavits across the table. Clara saw names, dates, signatures she didn't recognize. What is all this? Records proving Ketchum's mine's been cooking numbers for years, Silas said. Illegal wage deductions, ghost employees, fake land liens. He tapped one page. And here, your husband's signature forged with a left curl instead of a right. Amateur work. Clara's fingers trembled near the paper. You did all this overnight? No. Silas met her eyes. Been looking into Ketchum since before you arrived. Man's been buying silence with fear and cash. I'm done watching it happen. Clara felt a strange warmth beneath her ribs. Not comfort. Recognition. Someone fights back. She hadn't realized how badly she needed to see that. Silas gathered the papers again. I'm sending my rider to Fort Benton. Marshal Hale can act with this. Clara frowned. Marshal Hale already knows? He will, Silas said, by sundown. Dr. Pike muttered, You're calling a war onto your land. Silas shrugged. War's already on my land, I'm just naming it. Clara stepped closer. What do you need from me? Silas hesitated. A long, slow pause. Testimony, but only when you're ready. She studied him, the steadiness of his voice, the weariness tucked into his eyes. And if I'm not? Then I carry it alone, he said simply. Clara opened her mouth, stopped, swallowed the heaviness in her throat. Mr. Crowne, I don't want to be the reason you lose your ranch. He gave a faint, humorless smile. This ranch survived worse than Ketchum. It'll survive this too. Bo, hovering near the doorway, whispered, Mama, what's he doing? Silas crouched beside the boy. I'm setting a trap for bad men, one they can't shoot their way out of. Bo nodded solemnly, as though traps were part of a world he now understood too well. By midday, Silas had his foreman saddle a fresh horse. He handed the folder to a trusted rider, a wiry man named Sutton, who tipped his hat to Clara before galloping down the snowy road. When the sound of hoofbeats faded, Clara turned to Silas. Ketchum will know. Let him, Silas said quietly. He'll make his move sooner. Predictable men are easier to corner. Clara exhaled shakily. I don't like being bait. You're not, Silas said. I am. She looked away, unsure which truth stung more, that he was willing to take the fire for them or that they had somehow become worth the risk. Later, as dusk crept over the valley, Silas met Clara outside the barn. The sky bruised purple overhead, scented with snow that hadn't fallen yet. I left word in town, Silas said. Let slip I'll be riding in tomorrow morning. Alone. Clara stiffened. You want them to follow you? I want Ketchum to believe I'm leaving you unguarded, he corrected. Her hands tightened on her coat. It's dangerous. It's necessary, he said. Marshal Hale will be hiding along the ridge. They won't see him. And if something goes wrong? Silas gave her a quiet look, the kind that felt too honest for the cold air between them. I've lived with worse odds. Clara didn't realize she'd stepped closer until their breath fog met between them. I won't have you die for us, she whispered. I'm not dying, Silas said softly. I'm buying time. His words hit her harder than any warning. Time. Precious. Fragile. Borrowed. Something neither of them had been given freely in years. From the porch, Lila called out, voice thin as wind. Mama? Clara turned. Yes, sweetheart? Lila pointed toward the tree line. Something's moving. Silas followed her gaze. For a heartbeat, nothing stirred. Then a flicker, a rider's silhouette slipping behind the pines. They're watching, Silas murmured. Means the trap's springing. Clara felt the old familiar dread coil through her chest. But beneath it, something else lived now. Something steadier, shaped like belief. Maybe in Silas. Maybe in God's timing. Maybe in the stubborn hope that storms don't last forever. Night settled heavy over Crowne Ranch, and somewhere behind the pines, men prepared to come again, not knowing the ground beneath them was already shifting. Silas rode out at first light, breath steaming in the air like smoke from a weary engine. Clara watched from the window, Lila pressed against her side, Beau standing stiff and silent as a fence post. Silas didn't look back, not because he didn't care, but because men who'd buried too much knew better than to turn their heads before a fight. By mid-morning, the ranch felt wrong, too still, too hollow. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Clara forced herself through the motions, sweeping hearth ash, checking Lila's mittens, retying Beau's scarf, though he wasn't wearing it. Anything to keep her hands from shaking. Lord, steady me. Steady my steps. Then Beau froze at the window. Mama, he whispered. Horses. Clara's heart dropped. 4 riders approached, not rushing, not hiding, just claiming the land beneath them with each heavy step. The man in front wore a long, dark coat, tailored too fine for the frontier. He dismounted with practiced ease, boots landing soft on the snow. Vernon Ketchum didn't bother knocking. He strode up the porch as though he'd bought the house himself. Clara stepped into the doorway before he could open it. You have no right. Mrs. Harlan, he greeted smoothly, removing his gloves finger by finger. His smile was polished and empty as a church bell with no clapper. I do believe you've made things unnecessarily difficult. Beau slid in front of Clara. She placed a hand on his shoulder, steady but firm. You need to leave. Ketchum tisked lightly. I'd love to, but you, my dear, owe me a conversation. He lifted a folded document, clean, crisp, smug. Your debt settled in full. If you come with me now, willingly. Clara stared. The paper looked official, stamped, sealed. Lies wore their Sunday best today. No, she said. Ketchum didn't frown, didn't blink. Your children will be taken care of. I swear it on my reputation. That's exactly what I'm afraid of, Clara whispered. He leaned closer. Your husband made a poor investment. You can correct it. Or your little ones will suffer the consequences of your stubbornness. Mama? Lila's voice trembled. Clara wrapped an arm around her. Stay behind me, sweetheart. Ketchum's eyes narrowed. Crowne isn't here to hide you anymore, and he won't be back soon. A pause. A smile too gentle. Accidents happen on winter roads. The words stabbed Clara colder than the wind outside. Keep him safe. Behind Ketchum, one of his men stepped forward, eyeing the house like he was measuring door frames for a coffin. We check inside? He asked. Ketchum shrugged. We can't force her, but we can encourage her. Clara's pulse hammered. She lifted her chin. You're not stepping foot in this home. Then come out. Ketchum offered his hand, palm up. Let your children live in peace. Peace. A snake of a word. Clara had heard it used as threat before. She took one step forward. Beau gasped. Mama, don't. I have to, she whispered. But listen to me. Stay with Lila. Don't move. Beau clutched her coat, shaking. I don't want you to go. Clara brushed his cheek. I'm not going far. Then she turned to Ketchum, voice steady in a way her bones weren't. Repeat what you just said, about letting my children live in peace. Ketchum smiled, pleased. If you come now, they remain unharmed. They grow up fed, clothed, properly educated. They become someone's... Louder, Clara said. Ketchum blinked. Why? Clara stepped onto the porch, positioning herself so her voice would carry across the open yard, toward the bunkhouse, toward the stable, toward any soul within earshot. Because I want witnesses. Ketchum stiffened. Witnesses? To hear you admit you're threatening children to coerce a woman, Clara said. That's a hanging offense in half this territory. Ketchum's mask cracked for the first time, irritation slicing through the polish. Careful, Mrs. Harlan. Desperation makes you bold. Clara reached for the revolver tucked beneath her coat, the one Silas had given her, but her hand trembled just enough that the barrel tilted. She fired. The bullet struck the porch rail, splintering wood inches from Ketchum's hand. Not a miss. An announcement. His men jerked, guns half drawn, but Clara didn't flinch. Touch my children, she said, voice shaking only at the edges, and I swear the next one lands straight. One of Ketchum's men lunged, slamming her against the post, wrenching the revolver free. Bo screamed. Lila cried. Clara hit the porch hard enough to see white sparks burst behind her eyes. Ketchum crouched beside her, breath warm and venomous. You've complicated things, my dear. He stood, nodding to his men. Bring her. The world blurred. Shouts, boots, children crying. And Clara fought, nails cutting into frozen wood. Somewhere in the valley, a horse was galloping fast. Closer, closer. Silas, please. Ketchum didn't hear it yet, but Clara did. And hope, thin, cracked, impossible, rose in her chest like a spark fighting wind. The sound reached the porch before the horse did. A hard, rhythmic pounding that didn't belong to any ranch hand or wandering rider. Bo lifted his head, eyes wide with something too sharp to be hope. Ketchum froze mid-command. Even his men paused, hands tightening on their guns. Clara pushed herself up on trembling elbows. Lord, let it be him. A dark shape broke through the white glare of the valley, lurching, unsteady. Snow kicked beneath hooves. Blood speckled the saddle. Silas Crowne rode straight toward them. He wasn't whole. He wasn't strong. But he was coming. Ketchum's eyes narrowed. Impossible! Silas slid from the saddle before the horse fully stopped, landing hard on one knee. He braced a hand against the snow, rising slow, breath ripping through his chest. A long gash crossed his forehead, blood threading down his cheek. His coat was torn at the shoulder, soaked red, but his gun was steady. Let her go. Silas's voice scraped out raw, but unwavering. Now! Ketchum gave a thin, mocking laugh. Crowne, you look half dead. Half's enough. Clara shook free from the man gripping her. She staggered backward as Silas stepped in front of her, creating a wall of bleeding, breathing defiance. Ketchum lifted his chin. You should have stayed gone. Silas wiped blood from his brow with the back of his hand. Yeah, he murmured. But she cried out. Clara's breath hitched. He heard me? God. Did you carry it to him? Ketchum motioned to his men. Disarm him. Silas didn't move, didn't blink, didn't lower the gun. Touch your iron, he warned, and you won't finish the motion. The man closest to him hesitated. Something in Silas's posture, broken yet anchored, made even hired killers rethink their wages. Ketchum stepped closer. You can't stop us both. Not hurt like that. Silas lifted his revolver a fraction. I only need to stop you. Ketchum's smile thinned. You're bleeding out, Crowne. Let me make this simple. He pointed at Clara. She comes with me. The children stay alive. Silas's jaw flexed. A tremor passed through him. Pain, cold, memory. No, he said quietly. Wrong house. Wrong woman. Wrong day. Ketchum's eyes flickered. You think the law will save you? Hale can't prove— Oh, he can, Silas interrupted, voice gone soft as snowfall. Been waiting all morning for you to gift him a charge he can nail you on. Ketchum's gaze darted over the yard, confused, calculating, suddenly unsure. A distant rumble rose behind the pines. Bo recognized it first. Mama! Riders! Ketchum turned sharply. Marshal Gideon Hale and 5 deputies crested the ridge at speed, rifles slung, badges glinting hard as winter light. Their horses plowed down the slope, snow exploding around them. Ketchum swore. You set me up? Silas didn't deny it. Told you, wrong day. Arrest that man, Ketchum snapped, at his own riders. But his men were already backing away. Marshal Hale's voice boomed across the yard. Vernon Ketchum, stand down and drop your weapon. You're under arrest for attempted abduction, coercion, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Ketchum spun on Silas, fury twisting his face. You ruined everything. Silas's grip tightened on his gun. Blood dripped off his fingertips. You did that yourself. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Ketchum drew. Silas fired first. Not to kill. He angled down. The bullet tore through the snow by Ketchum's boot, exploding ice into the man's coat. The shock was enough. Deputies slammed into Ketchum a second later, yanking his arms behind him, wrenching his gun free. Clara sagged against the porch column, lungs trembling. Bo grabbed her waist. Lila sobbed into her skirt. Silas remained standing, barely. When the danger broke, when the shouts faded into the crackle of metal cuffs closing, his body finally betrayed him. His knees buckled. Clara lunged forward, catching his shoulders before he hit the ground. His weight collapsed into her, heavy, warm, terrifyingly human. You came back, she whispered. Silas blinked through blood. Course I did, he murmured. Still owe you a sunrise. Clara's throat tightened. You're hurt. Yeah. His voice slid into a whisper. But I saw him lay hands on you, and I ain't letting the world take another family from me. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it. Behind them, Hale barked orders. Deputies dragged Ketchum toward the horses. Snow swirled like ash around the scene, softening nothing. Silas's eyes fluttered. Clara grasped his face with both hands. Stay with me, she begged. Silas, stay. He inhaled, shaky but real. Not going anywhere, ma'am. And for the first time since the storm began, Clara believed him. But peace was still a distant shore, and the wind carried a truth she could not ignore. When a man bleeds for you, the fight is only half over. News traveled through town faster than the deputies' horses. Before dusk, every stove-warmed parlor from Main Street to the river bend whispered the same story. Crowne fought for a widow. Crowne bled for her. Crowne wants to marry her. None of it was spoken kindly. Clara learned this as soon as she stepped off the wagon in town 3 days after Ketchum's arrest. She had gone only to buy cloth for Lila and medicine for the fever Silas still tried to hide. But the moment she lifted her veil, conversations around her thinned like smoke escaping a cracked chimney. That's her. Moved right into his house, they say. Smart girl. Widows know how to land soft. Clara's hands tightened on her basket. She felt Beau shift closer, small shoulders squared in that way children adopt when they try to grow up in a single breath. Don't listen, Mama, he whispered. She wasn't listening. She was surviving. There was a difference. When they returned to the ranch, she found Silas sitting near the fire, arm bandaged, face pale beneath the healing cut. He looked up with a weary smile that didn't reach his eyes. How was town? Clara removed her shawl slowly, as though the fabric carried the voices with it. Unforgiving. Silas exhaled. I figured. Clara didn't speak right away. She crossed the room, setting down the basket, watching him the way a person watches a candle flicker in the draft, afraid it'll go out if she blinks. You should rest, she said softly. He chuckled under his breath. Restin' feels like quittin'. Can't quite shake that. Clara brushed ash from the hearth. They're talking about us, about me, about intentions. Silas's jaw worked, a muscle jumping. Let 'em. Folks in this territory think talk is a form of currency. Doesn't make it truth. But they say I came here to trap you, she murmured, voice low. That I knew you were rich. That I used the storm to... Silas stood abruptly, pain flashing through him. Clara. Her name came out rough, honest. You walked onto my land starving, frozen, hunted. You didn't come to trap anybody. You came to live. His voice softened. I just happened to be the one who opened the door. She swallowed hard. It should have comforted her. Instead, it broke something open inside. But your name is the one they're dragging. Mine's just tied to it. Silas stepped closer. Is that why you've been distant since the arrest? Clara forced herself to meet his gaze. I'm not ashamed of you, Silas. Then what are you afraid of? She inhaled sharply. That marrying you would look like payment. That it would look like I'm taking advantage of what you gave us. I don't want my children to grow up thinking their safety came with a price tag. Silas's expression faltered, just for a moment. A flicker of hurt, quickly buried. I never asked marriage as repayment. I know, she whispered, but people will think it. Well, Silas folded his arms, bracing himself against something invisible. Do you care what they think? Clara opened her mouth, then closed it again. Lord, do I? Should I? Before she could answer, hoofbeats thundered outside. The door swung open, wind and snow rushing in with iris hail, cheeks flushed from the cold, shawl pinned tight. Clara, Iris said, rushing forward. I came as soon as I heard the churchwomen stirring trouble. Clara blinked. Churchwomen? Iris snorted. A more dangerous breed than outlaws on some days. She reached into her satchel. I brought this. She laid 2 documents on the table. One was the certified statement from Marshal Hale detailing Ketchum's attempted abduction and fraud. The other... Clara's breath hitched. Her husband's death certificate, clean and official, stamped by territorial authority. The original had burned in a fire the spring before he died. "I pulled every string I had left," Iris said softly. "These will silence anyone who questions your right to rebuild your life." Clara sat slowly, fingertips brushing the papers. The world swayed. I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me," Iris replied. "Thank the Lord for timing." She leaned closer. "And thank the man who bled for you. Folks don't bleed that way unless they mean it." Silas's ears reddened. "Iris, hush!" She cut him off. "I'm not meddling. I'm stating facts." Clara folded the documents carefully, pressing them to her chest, as though they were fragile and holy at once. Her eyes stung with a feeling she had tried for days to smother. But Beau seemed to know before she said a word. He stepped up to Silas, small but steady. "Mr. Crowne," he said, voice soft but sure, "are you going to be our family?" Silas froze. A man could survive storms, bullets, grief, but the quiet hope of a child could undo him faster than any wound. He knelt, wincing at the pain. "Only if your mama wants that. And only if you want that too." Beau looked at Clara. She nodded, tears finally breaking free. "It's your choice, sweetheart." Beau reached out, hesitant, trembling, and slid his hand into Silas's. Silas inhaled shakily, closing his fingers around the boy's small one. "All right then," he whispered. Later that evening, as townsfolk gathered in the church hall for what was supposed to be a small, private ceremony, whispers stirred again. A few women stood to object, citing propriety, timing, impropriety, anything they could think of that wasn't the truth. Clara stood before the minister. She didn't shrink. She didn't bow. She reached into her cloak, lifted the death certificate and Hale's affidavit, and held them up with quiet strength. "This is my past," she said. She lowered her hand, finding Silas beside her. "And this is my future." The hall fell still. No cheers, no applause. Just a settling, like snow deciding where to land. Silas turned to her, voice low enough only she could hear. "You sure about this, ma'am?" Clara reached for his hand. "I've never been more sure." The minister cleared his throat. The vows were spoken. Beau squeezed Silas's coat. Lila wrapped both arms around Clara's skirt. It wasn't a grand wedding. It wasn't a loud one. But it was whole. Outside, the wind quieted, for the first time in weeks, as though the sky itself paused to listen. Peace didn't last in these parts. Clara knew that. But tonight? Tonight, peace had a name, and she wore it gladly. Winter settled heavy over Crowne Ranch, the kind of winter that pressed its weight into the bones of every living soul. Clara moved slower now, one hand resting beneath her ribs, breath soft and short. Beau chopped wood with more determination than strength, and little Lila folded blankets with small, serious hands. Silas kept busy in ways that fooled no one, fixing hinges already fixed, stacking supplies that didn't need restocking, checking windows twice before nightfall. "Ketchum's been sentenced," Clara said one evening as she stirred broth. "Marshal Hale says it's finished." Silas didn't lift his eyes. "Finished ain't the same as over." Clara studied him, the scar on his brow, the stiff way he carried his left shoulder. Men had a way of preparing for storms, even after the sky turned clear. "I know that feeling," she thought. Snow deepened through the following days. The The drifts rose higher than the porch steps. Wind battered the shutters like fists. By the third morning, Pike had failed twice to reach them, ignored by a storm that had swallowed the world beyond the yard. Clara woke before dawn with pain knifing through her middle. "Silas?" Her whisper trembled. He was upright in an instant. "How long you been feeling that?" "Since a while." Another contraction bent her forward. "It's early." Silas helped her sit, fear slipping past the hard lines of his face. "I'll go for Pike." "You won't make it 10 steps in that storm," Clara gasped, "and I won't lose you in it." Silas looked toward the window, nothing but white fury pushing against the glass. His voice cracked low. "I can't bury another family, Clara." "You won't," she whispered. "Not this time." Another wave took her breath. She clutched his coat, and he held her as if holding the world steady. Bo appeared at the doorway, hair sticking up, eyes wide. "Mama?" Clara forced a smile. "It's time, sweetheart. Take Lila to your room. Stay close." Bo swallowed hard but nodded, guiding his sister away. He kept looking back, fearful the house might change shape while he wasn't watching. Silas laid blankets by the fire and set water to warm. Clara saw the tremor in his hands, not from cold, but memory. He had lost a wife and daughter to winter once. He had braced for years against a grief that never thawed. She reached for him. "Silas." He knelt beside her. Snow shook the window. "I'm here." "You're not losing me," she whispered. "We're not ghosts." His breath hitched. "I know. But storms, they take what they want." Hours blurred into one long ache. Clara gripped Silas's hands through each contraction, his voice steadying her when the world tilted. "Breathe with me. I've got you. You're not alone." Pain crested, broke, returned. Clara clung to his coat, forehead pressed against his shoulder. She felt his tears fall into her hair, silent, ashamed, honest. "Don't leave me," he whispered once, barely a breath. "I won't," she answered, though she wasn't sure if she spoke aloud or only felt the words. Then, a cry. Small, thin, beautiful. Silas's hands shook as he lifted the newborn girl, wrapped in the quilt Lila had stitched with uneven stars. He looked as if he were holding a miracle he never believed he'd see again. "It's a girl," he breathed. Clara wept with relief. "Is she strong?" "She's perfect." His voice cracked. "God's mercy. She's perfect." He laid the baby against Clara's chest, and warmth bloomed between them stronger than the fire. Bo and Lila slipped into the room moments later, tiptoeing, awestruck. "Mama?" Bo whispered. "Can we see her?" "Come here," Clara said, smiling through tears. "Meet your sister." Silas stood behind them, one hand on Bo's shoulder, the other brushing Lila's braid as she leaned into him. When Clara looked up, Silas's eyes met hers, full of wonder, fear, devotion, and something steadier than all three. "We're a family now," he said softly. Outside, the storm howled one last time, then eased, as if winter itself bowed its head and stepped aside.